The bridge of the Resolve thrummed with quiet efficiency, its crew moving with the precision of a symphony orchestra. Captain Adrian Vallon stood at the central console, his sharp eyes scanning the tactical display. The glowing hologram projected a disturbing sight, a cluster of Saracen warships in orbit around the human colony of Galvis. The colony's desperate distress signal replayed in the background, punctuated by static-filled cries for help. "Captain!" Lieutenant Commander Elise Carr, Adrian's second-in-command, spoke from the comms station. "Incoming message from the Saracen flagship. It's Warlord Vrixerthran himself." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Patch it through." The holographic display shifted, replaced by the imposing figure of Vrixerthran. The Syrixian's scaled face was marked with ridges, his golden eyes gleaming with contempt. He leaned closer, his voice dripping with disdain. "Captain Vallon, your pitiful warning arrived too late. Galvis will serve as an example of humanity's weakness." Adrian's expression remained cold, his voice steady. "Warlord Thran, humanity does not start wars lightly, but we end them decisively. Withdraw your forces, or you'll regret this arrogance." Vrixer chuckled, a guttural sound that sent a ripple of tension across the bridge. "Regret? No, human. It is you who will regret crossing paths with us. Your kind is fragile. Your fleets are primitive. Prepare for annihilation." The transmission cut out abruptly. Adrian exhaled, turning to Elise. "Status on Galvis? The colony's shields are holding for now, but reports indicate significant damage to the infrastructure. If the Syrixians deploy ground forces..." She trailed off, her meaning clear. Adrian nodded. "We can't let that happen. Helm, plot a course to Galvis, maximum speed." As the crew scrambled to execute his orders, Adrian took a moment to center himself. The memory of his sister's death surfaced unbidden, a similar scene of destruction, the helplessness of watching from afar. "Not this time," he vowed silently. "Not on my watch." The journey to Galvis was tense. The Resolve, leading a small flotilla of Federation ships, prepared for what was likely to be a lopsided battle. Adrian stood at the strategy table, reviewing the Saracen formation. Their fleet outnumbered the human ships 3-1, and their technology was notoriously advanced. But numbers and tech weren't everything. "Commander Carr," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "Thoughts on their formation?" Elise frowned, analyzing the display. "It's traditional Saracen doctrine, tight phalanx, overlapping shields. Strong defensively but sluggish. They're daring us to attack head-on." Adrian allowed himself a faint smile. "Which means we won't." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a plan, Captain?" "I always have a plan," Adrian replied, his tone laced with quiet confidence. "We'll bait them out of position. Once they break formation, we'll exploit the gaps." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Ensign Park at the comms station. "Captain, distress signal from Galvis just updated. They're reporting Saracen troop landers preparing for deployment." Adrian's voice hardened. "How long until we're in weapons range?" 5 minutes, sir," the helmsman replied. Adrian nodded, his mind racing. "Communications, send a priority broadcast to the fleet. All ships are to focus fire on their carriers. We disable their troop transports first." "Understood?" "Aye, Captain," the comms officer replied. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Galvis system. The sight was grim. The Saracen ships, sleek and menacing, surrounded the planet like a cage of predators. Adrian's fleet was a fraction of their size, but he knew the Syrixians' arrogance was their weakness. "Battle stations," Adrian commanded. Red lights flared across the bridge as the crew snapped into action. "Enemy ships have detected us, Captain," Elise reported. "They're moving to intercept." "Good," Adrian said. "Let them come." The Resolve and its escorts advanced, their engines blazing against the star-dappled void. The Syrixians closed the distance quickly, their ships bristling with weapons. The first volley erupted from the enemy fleet, a wall of plasma bolts streaking toward the human ships. "Evasive maneuvers!" Adrian barked. The Resolve rolled sharply, its shields absorbing the impact of a glancing blow. Around it, the smaller human ships scattered, dodging and weaving through the storm of fire. Adrian's fleet returned fire, bright lances of energy cutting through the darkness. "Target their lead carrier!" Adrian ordered. "Concentrate all fire on its engines." The bridge shook as the Resolve's main battery unleashed a devastating salvo. The lead Saracen carrier shuddered, flames erupting from its rear thrusters. Adrian seized the moment. "Elise, signal the fleet to follow my lead. We're breaking their line." The human ships surged forward, exploiting the chaos. Saracen ships scrambled to regroup, their tight formation unraveling. Adrian's gambit was working. "Captain, enemy flagship is repositioning," Elise called out. "Vrixer's trying to cut us off." Adrian's mind worked quickly. The Syrixian's flagship was a massive dreadnought, bristling with firepower. If it reached the colony, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Park," Adrian said, addressing the comms officer. "Open a channel to the fleet." The comms crackled as Adrian's voice carried across the flotilla. "This is Captain Valen. The Syrixians think we're fragile. Let's show them how wrong they are. Focus your fire, protect the colony, and trust your training. Humanity stands together." A chorus of acknowledgments echoed back, and the human fleet pressed its attack. The smaller ships harassed the Saracen dreadnought, drawing its fire while the Resolve positioned itself for a decisive strike. The battle raged on, the void filled with explosions and streaks of light. Adrian's plan was succeeding, but at a cost. Several human ships were heavily damaged, their crews fighting to hold on. Adrian felt the weight of each loss but pushed it aside. The colony had to survive. "Captain," Elise said urgently, "enemy reinforcements detected on long-range scanners. We're running out of time." Adrian nodded grimly. "We end this now. Helm, plot a collision course with their flagship." The crew stared at him in shock. Elise was the first to recover. "Sir, that's a bluff," Adrian interrupted. "We'll pull up at the last second. But Vrixer doesn't know that." Understanding dawned on Elise's face. "Aye, Captain." The Resolve accelerated, its prow aimed directly at the Saracen dreadnought. The bridge fell silent, the tension palpable as they closed the distance. At the last possible moment, Adrian gave the order. "All hands brace! Hard turn!" The Resolve veered sharply, narrowly avoiding the enemy's ship. The maneuver brought them directly behind the dreadnought, where its defenses were weakest. "Fire everything we have!" Adrian commanded. The Resolve's weapons roared to life, slamming into the Saracen flagship. Explosions rippled across its hull, and moments later, the massive ship began to list, its engines failing. The Syrixians broke off their attack, retreating in disarray. On the bridge of the Resolve, a cheer erupted as the realization sank in: they had won the first battle. Adrian allowed himself a brief smile before turning to Elise. "This was just the opening move," he said quietly. "Vrixer won't let this stand." Elise nodded. "What's the plan, Captain?" Adrian's gaze hardened as he stared at the tactical display. "We prepare for the next move. And this time, we finish it." The Resolve drifted silently in the darkness of the asteroid field, its engines powered down to avoid detection. The jagged rocks moved lazily in the void, illuminated only by the faint glow of distant stars. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense, every member of the crew acutely aware that one wrong move could give away their position to the Saracen fleet. Captain Adrian Valen leaned over the tactical display, his eyes fixed on the enemy formation displayed in cold, clinical detail. The Syrixians had spread their blockade tighter around Galdis, sealing off any direct approach to the colony. Their flagship, a massive dreadnought, loomed at the center of the formation, like a spider in its web. "They've adjusted their positions," Lieutenant Commander Elise Carr said, standing beside him. "They're expecting us to charge head-on." Adrian gave a grim nod. "Good. Let them expect it." He straightened and turned to the bridge crew. "We're not taking their bait. The asteroid field gives us cover, but we'll have to be precise. Ensign Park, Any sign they've picked up our trail? Park shook his head from the comm station. Negative, Captain. Their scanners aren't penetrating the field yet. Adrian's gaze lingered on the tactical display. They couldn't afford a prolonged battle. The colony's defenses were already strained. He needed a decisive strike that would shatter the Saracen blockade and force them to retreat. The question was how to lure the enemy into a mistake. Elise, what's the status of their carriers? Adrian asked. Carr studied the display. 3 carriers in the fleet, all positioned toward the rear of their formation. If we take those out, it'll cripple their ability to deploy reinforcements. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. They'll expect us to go for the carriers. We'll use that against them. The plan was simple in concept but required flawless execution. The Resolve and 2 of its escorts would create a diversion, drawing the Saracen fleet into the asteroid field. Once the enemy's formation was disrupted, the remaining human ships would strike the carriers from the flank. It was a dangerous gamble, but Adrian knew they had no other choice. Helm, Adrian said. Plot a course through the densest section of the field. Take us as close to the rocks as you can without scraping the paint. The helmsman, a wiry young officer named Lin, gave a tight smile. Understood, Captain. I'll try not to scratch her. Elise, signal the fleet. I want every ship ready for silent running until we're in position. Carr relayed the order, and a quiet hum of acknowledgement rippled through the crew. Adrian could feel the tension thickening as the minutes ticked by. This wasn't just about tactics or skill, it was about trust. Every person aboard the Resolve had to believe in the plan and in their captain. The Resolve eased through the asteroid field, its movements slow and deliberate. Massive chunks of rock loomed on all sides, their surfaces pockmarked and uneven. The only sound on the bridge was the soft beeping of instruments, and the occasional murmur of status updates. Captain, Park said suddenly, his voice low but urgent. We've got movement, small Saracen vessels entering the field. Looks like they've sent scouts. Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. They're probing us. Elise, prepare the forward rail guns. We'll take them out quietly before they can report back. The Resolve crept forward, its weapons silently aligning with the lead Saracen scout. A pulse of blue energy streaked through the darkness, striking the vessel dead center. The scout ship erupted in a flash of light, its remains scattering into the void. Target neutralized, Elise reported. No signs they managed to send a signal. Good, Adrian said. Keep us moving. We can't afford to get bogged down. As the fleet pressed deeper into the field, the Saracen presence became more pronounced. The enemy seemed to sense something was amiss but hadn't yet pinpointed the human ship's location. Adrian knew their window of opportunity was closing fast. Captain, Elise said quietly, the other ships are in position. They're waiting for your signal. Adrian nodded, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. The Syrixians had taken the bait, their formation starting to shift as they sent more ships into the asteroid field. It wasn't a full collapse, but it was enough. No, Adrian said firmly. All ships engage. The quiet of the asteroid field shattered as the human fleet sprang into action. The Resolve surged forward, its railguns blazing. The lead Saracen frigate took the brunt of the assault, its shields flickering before collapsing under the onslaught. Human ships darted between the rocks, using the terrain to outmaneuver the larger, slower Saracen vessels. Target their engines, Adrian ordered. We need to keep them off balance. The bridge rocked as the Resolve took a glancing hit from a Saracen plasma cannon. Sparks flew from one of the consoles, but the crew held steady. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Helm, adjust course, 3 degrees port. Weapons, focus fire on that destroyer. Take it out of the fight. The destroyer exploded moments later, its remains scattering like fireworks across the void. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Adrian remained focused. They weren't out of danger yet. Amidst the chaos, a new threat emerged. The Saracen flagship, massive and bristling with weapons, entered the field. Its cannons fired indiscriminately, obliterating asteroids and forcing the human ships to scatter. Captain, they're targeting us, Elise warned. Let them, Adrian said coolly. They're overextending. Helm, take us deeper into the field. We'll draw them into a trap. The Resolve weaved through the rocks, its engines pushing to their limits. The Saracen flagship pursued, its size making it slower to adjust course. Adrian waited, counting the seconds until the moment was right. Now! He barked. All ships converge on the flagship. Hit it from all sides! The human fleet moved as one, their weapons lighting up the void. The Saracen flagship's shields absorbed the first volley but faltered under the sustained assault. One by one, the human ships found their marks, targeting weak points in the enemy's hull. The Saracen flagship shuddered, its engines sputtering as explosions rippled across its surface. On the Resolve's bridge, Adrian watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Signal the fleet to disengage, he said. We've done enough damage. Let's get back to Gallus. Elise hesitated. What about the remaining Saracen ships? They'll regroup, but not in time to stop us, Adrian replied. We've broken their formation. Now it's time to finish the job. As the Resolve and its fleet pulled away from the asteroid field, Adrian allowed himself a rare moment of relief. The first part of the plan had worked, but the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Captain, Park said, his voice cutting through the quiet. We intercepted a transmission from the Syrixians. Vrixer's planning a final strike on the colony. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready for him. Elise met his gaze. What's the next move? Adrian's expression was steely. We end this for good. The Resolve dropped out of hyperspace above Gallus, the once bustling colony now overshadowed by the ominous presence of the Saracen fleet. Smoke curled from the colony's battered defense platforms, their once formidable energy shields flickering weakly. Despite the chaos below, Gallus still stood, a testament to human resilience. Captain Adrian Vallon stood at the center of the bridge, his face a mask of determination. The tactical display showed the Saracen fleet consolidating near the planet. At the heart of their formation loomed the enemy flagship, its massive hull gleaming like a predator in the light of Galthus' sun. Adrian's gaze hardened. They'd lured the Syrixians into overconfidence, and now it was time to strike the final blow. Commander Carr, Adrian said, his voice calm yet firm. What's our status? Lieutenant Commander Elise Carr straightened. Shields at 90%. Weapons systems fully operational. The fleet is reporting readiness across the board. Adrian nodded. Good. We've hit them where it hurts, but Vrixer will throw everything he has at us. We need to make this count. The comms officer, Ensign Park, interrupted. Incoming transmission from the Saracen flagship, Captain. It's Warlord Thran again. Adrian's jaw tightened. Put him through. The holographic display shifted, revealing Vrixer Thran. His golden eyes burned with fury, and his ridged face was twisted into a sneer. Captain Vallon, Vrixer growled. Your defiance is admirable, but futile. You've cost me ships and time, but you cannot stop what's coming. Galdus will fall, and with it, the rest of your pitiful colonies. Adrian met the alien warlord's gaze without flinching. You've underestimated us before, Vrixer. Don't make that mistake again. Vrixer leaned closer to the hologram, his tone dripping with disdain. Your kind is weak, soft. You cling to hope like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. I will show you what true strength looks like. Adrian's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. And I'll show you what happens when you start a war you can't win. Before Vrixer could respond, Adrian gestured to Park, cutting the transmission. The hologram fizzled out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Helm, Adrian ordered. Position us between the Saracen fleet and the colony. We'll hold the line here. Carr frowned. Captain, if we take the brunt of their assault, we'll risk the fleet. Adrian turned to her, his voice steady. It's a risk we have to take. If Galdus falls, millions of lives are lost. The colony is the key to everything. We buy time for its defenses to stabilize, and then we hit them where it hurts. Carr hesitated but nodded. Understood, sir. The Resolve and its allied ships moved into formation, creating a protective barrier around Galvez. Adrian's fleet was battered but determined, their ranks tight despite the odds. As the Saracen ships advanced, the void between the fleets grew tense, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Enemy vessels are locking weapons, Captain, Park reported. Let them fire first, Adrian said. We need to draw them in closer. Seconds later, the Saracen fleet opened fire. A storm of plasma bolts streaked through space, slamming into the human ship's shields. The Resolve shuddered under the impact, warning lights flashing across the bridge. Shields holding at 70%. Carr called out over the din. Return fire, Adrian commanded. Target their frigates first. We'll cut through their smaller ships and open a path to the flagship. The Resolve's railguns roared to life, sending bursts of energy into the Saracen fleet. The smaller enemy vessels struggled to maneuver under the relentless barrage, their shields faltering one by one. The human fleet pressed the advantage, weaving through the chaos to strike with precision. Amidst the battle, Adrian's mind remained focused on the larger goal, taking out Vrixer's flagship. He turned to Carr. Status on the enemy flagship? It's holding back, Captain, she replied, studying the display. They're using the smaller ships as a screen. Typical Saracen tactics. Adrian's eyes narrowed. They're waiting for us to overcommit. But we won't play their game. He turned to the comms station. Park, patch me through to the fleet. The officer nodded, and moments later, Adrian's voice carried across the flotilla. This is Captain Valen. The Syrixians think they can outlast us, but they're wrong. All ships, focus fire on their forward line. Break through and create an opening. We're taking the fight to their flagship. A chorus of acknowledgments followed, and the fleet moved as one. The human ships unleashed a coordinated assault, punching through the Saracen formation with ruthless efficiency. The enemy vessels scrambled to regroup, their cohesion breaking under the relentless pressure. Captain, we have a clear path to the flagship, Carr announced. Adrian's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. Helm, take us in. Weapons, prepare to fire all forward batteries. The Resolve surged forward, leading the charge toward the Saracen dreadnought. The enemy ship loomed larger with each passing second, its weapons bristling with power. As they closed the distance, the dreadnought opened fire. Massive plasma beams lanced through the void, narrowly missing the Resolve. Adrian gripped the edge of the console, his voice cutting through the chaos. Evasive maneuvers! Keep us on course! The Resolve rolled sharply, dodging another blast. The crew worked with precision, their movements a testament to their training and determination. Target their main weapon array, Adrian ordered. If we can disable it, they'll lose their advantage. The railguns fired, striking the dreadnought's weapon systems. Explosions rippled across its hull, and the massive cannons fell silent. Inside the dreadnought, Vrixer Thran watched the battle unfold with growing fury. The humans were more formidable than he had anticipated, their tenacity defying all logic. Warlord, one of his officers said nervously. Their lead ship is closing in. Our shields are failing. Vrixer snarled. Then fight harder. I will not be humiliated by these creatures. On the Resolve, Adrian saw his chance. Elise, prepare the boarding party. If we take Vrixer alive, we end this war. Carr hesitated. Sir, boarding their flagship is a massive risk. I know, Adrian said quietly. But it's the only way. Minutes later, Adrian and a small team launched toward the Saracen dreadnought in a shuttle. The docking process was harrowing, the small craft buffeted by enemy fire. But they made it. Inside the enemy ship, the team moved with precision, cutting through resistance as they advanced toward the bridge. The corridors were dimly lit and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of scorched metal. When they finally breached the bridge, Vrixer was waiting, flanked by his guards. The warlord's golden eyes burned with rage as he faced Adrian. You should have stayed in your hole, human, Vrixer snarled. Adrian raised his weapon, his voice steady. Your fleet is broken, Vrixer. Surrender, and I'll spare your life. Vrixer laughed, a cold, guttural sound. I'd rather die than submit to your kind. The tension snapped like a coiled spring as the room erupted into chaos. Adrian's team fought fiercely, their training and determination driving them forward. In the end, it was Adrian who stood over Vrixer, his weapon aimed at the defeated warlord. You had your chance, Adrian said coldly. The shot echoed through the bridge, marking the end of the Saracen threat. Back on the Resolve, the crew erupted into cheers as the Saracen fleet began to retreat. Adrian returned to the bridge, exhaustion etched into his features. It's over, Carr said softly. Adrian nodded, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. For now. But they'll be back. And we'll be ready. The stars outside the viewport seemed to burn brighter, a silent testament to humanity's resolve.